So this is the iPhone 12, and I've had this phone since 2020. This phone came out in the height of the pandemic, but it's actually going to be updated to iOS 26 here, probably the official version coming just in a week or so. So let's find out how it runs and just kind of get an idea what to expect with this iPhone 12 on iOS 26. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and let's go ahead and take a look at the iOS 26 on iPhone 12. Let's go ahead and boot this thing up in 3, 2, go, and see how long it takes for that Apple logo to appear in the phone to get into iOS 26. Now I am going to be running the latest version of the public beta, which is already basically in the complete form. Mostly like the performance is already really good, so it's already basically going to run like what you're going to see on the release version. So that booted up in about 19 to 20 seconds. I was a little bit slow on hitting the button there. But the phone, not bad for a 5-year-old phone, booting up in just 19 to 20 seconds. That's pretty good, especially if you're in an emergency situation where maybe you had to reboot the phone, a frozen iPhone or something like that. That's actually pretty fast to turn on. So the very first thing I want to do is confirm the build number here. So we'll go to settings. We'll scroll over here to general. I'll hit the about section. And if we go to iOS 26, you'll see 23A5336A. So the A will signify we're still in beta here. However, again, this beta is already very far along and basically a completed version. So let's go ahead now and get a look at the actual lock screen, kind of how the animation looks flying in, because Apple did update this, and see if we get any jumpy stuff here or stutters. You might get a little bit of a stutter on the very first boot, but you can see it actually looks pretty visually pleasing. So you're going to get that same effect that people get on the newer iPhone. Scrolling through the general home pages here of iOS 26 on the iPhone 12 presents you with essentially the same performance you'll see on a newer iPhone device. So the springboard basically is still very good. Now going through here into the control center area, as we go through, you can see that little bounce effect is still smooth here for the iPhone 12 as well. And if we go over here to add a control, let's go ahead and add a control and see how this pops up. A little bit of jumpiness there, so that didn't look super smooth. So expect this area to be a little bit jumpy, especially on the first time you open it on a cold boot. It's definitely going to feel that way, but it's a little bit choppy inside here when adding a control. That is one area I am noticing, although I found on even some newer phones that could be a little bit slower. You can see right there when operating these widgets in here, everything does seem to be fine. These controls spread out perfectly fine. And if we scroll over here and we resize this right here, you'll see that also performed very well. So the actual, just the general OS, the UX, it's actually performing very good, even on this older iPhone. So if I scroll through here, we can take a look at the liquid glass effects right here. Let's go into the App Store and we'll take a look down here to see how this performs. And you'll see it doesn't take a lot of performance to do those visual animations. So those are going to be very good as well. And overall, I would say generally you can see the liquid glass there through the applications. Generally, I would say on the iPhone 12, for just the base home screens, it's performing just like maybe a newer iPhone would perform. So that's very good for users who don't want a laggy home screen. That's not going to be happening here. Although you can still sense the 60 Hertz panel if you are coming from a ProMotion display, you can see that difference. But that's not any different than even an iPhone 16 with the 60 Hertz refresh. Hopefully that changes here next week when we see the introduction of the iPhone 17 base model. All right, so we're going to jump through some applications. First thing I want to do though is show you my battery health and charging. We'll go here. You can see my battery is at 100% capacity on this iPhone 12. I'm going to go ahead and showcase to you the temperature of this phone before we launch the applications. It's sitting at a pretty respectable 95, 96 degrees, so not bad. I did notice in my preliminary testing before making this video though, that the phone really did get rather warm under launching multiple applications. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to go ahead and scroll out or close out everything. And we'll start here with calendar. We'll go to clock. We'll go through a couple of sub menus and we'll hit calculator. We'll go into Apple Weather, and then we're going to go into Games, and we'll go over here to App Store. And I noticed that all of the Apple-based applications run just fine. So that's a good thing. Let's go over here into News, and this was a 4 gig of RAM version of an iPhone, so that's pretty good for you. However, the A14 Bionic is not quite as snappy as it once was. You can still do all the basic tasks that you would do on an iPhone here. Let's go on Instagram. Battery life has never been my favorite, and it's not looking incredible here either on iOS 26, but it's definitely pretty similar to the way it's been on an iPhone 12, which is to say half a day, or I wouldn't say half a day, probably a little bit more than half a day, but not making it through the entire day if you're using it heavily. You will be charging this a little bit more frequently just due to its weaker battery, but applications there, third party, seem to work fine. If we launch Amazon here, that's also doing just fine. Of course, that scrolling is just a little bit choppier than a newer phone. YouTube did launch a little bit slower than I would like. Let's go over here to music, but that was because it was showcasing that pop-up. Let's go back here, and we'll go over to a couple other things. How about action thrillers? Let's go over here to this, combat sports. We'll go here, wilderness, and you'll just see that overall, once an application, there's almost no perceptible difference between this and a newer phone when you're actually in the app. However, the gaming department is definitely going to show its age. Launching apps, probably not on some casual apps, but if you start playing Destiny, Call of Duty, anything RPG or a little bit more graphically demanding, you definitely will start to feel the heat and the lack of more powerful frame rates, GPU, like you find on the newer iPhones. So launching here, I could play this game casually, no problem. There was a little bit of stutter there as he turned around to start going. There was a little stutter there. We'll go to RTS, Race to Sun, and you'll see right here as we get into the game, this is just fine. But I would still call the iPhone 12 probably more of a basic use phone, because as you start flipping back through these applications, they are going to they probably are going to not load quite as well. And you can see the Apple Store taking a little bit of a second to load, as they do have a lot of content on here. So when you are loading up pages that have a lot of images and things like that, the iPhone 12 does feel noticeably slower than 16. So it does show its weaker nowadays performance in areas like that. But it's nothing like back in the day when you had like 1 or 2 gig of RAM iPhones. Those things slowed down way more. But yeah, you can go ahead and play Free Fire, no massive issues whatsoever. And we'll go over here. And that's a good thing. The iPhones are so well optimized that even this dated iPhone, I had Subway Surfers ties, so we're not going to open that again. Even this dated iPhone could potentially still be a very usable phone for you if you didn't want to upgrade and wanted to wait till even the next iPhone comes out. It is still functional and it can be useful still even now. We dropped 2% just launching 12 apps. Battery life is not phenomenal, but what I want to do now, since we launched all those apps, is showcase the temperature, because I already feel it warming up. You've seen right there at its highest point, it jumped to 110 degrees. So just opening up like 12 apps, the temperature on this phone there's 112, got way hotter. So that's one thing I do notice about this phone. And this is not just a beta thing. This is just something I noticed about the iPhone 12, is that it does tend to warm up quite a bit when you start pushing it, versus newer phones. They stay much cooler to the touch. So that could be a major upgrade for you if you get tired of the phone just feeling a little bit too hot. And also I noticed when the phone gets too hot, of course, the battery drains more as well. Now, iPhone 12 also features 4 gigabytes of RAM. You can see it identified right there at 3.60. If I do hop back between these applications, you'll see that the applications are holding pretty well until we get to RTS. And Subway Surfers held itself. Dead Trigger 2 is going to get a relaunch here. And as we go ahead and hit play, we would have to relaunch that game. So definitely this phone is going to have some reload issues if you tend to switch applications frequently, especially if they're more than just basics. Basic apps should hold pretty decent, as it is 4 gigs of RAM, but you really need 6 and up to start holding more applications on iPhone. That's why I like phones like the iPhone 14 Pro Max and newer in terms of that. And also the animation, while it is faster for sure, you can see it is faster on iOS 26. It doesn't make up for the older performance, as this phone will tend to reload some things, but it still feels faster than I feel like it felt on the prior version, iOS 18. All right, so I'm going to just do a quick demo of some real world usage. So I'm reading an article here. I'm going to thumbs up this article. Then I'm going to swipe over here, go to Instagram and comment on this post. This is going to be, you see how the keyboard took a second to load there? That was a little bit slow. Pixel 10 Pro XL, Fire device. So if we go over here, swipe up over here, let's go ahead, go to games and see what we have we can download for a game. As we swipe through, I noticed as I scrolled there, so you have to have a little bit of patience down here as that relaunches. I know it's minor, but it's a feel thing. You actually feel it like taking a second, which in 2025, let's face it, most phones are so fast, people don't even want to wait a second for things to load. If we go over here to X, there's a little bit of a pause in between that scroll, like a scroll delay right there. But generally, if you're looking, nothing's really like crashing or bugging out. So that's a thumbs up for a 5-year-old iPhone. I'm pretty impressed. Here in 3D Mark, you can actually see within this benchmark that there's a little bit of choppiness in the frames here as it's going through this testing. It is averaging around 12, but I can kind of just see it. I'm not sure the camera's picking it up, but it's a little bit jumpy. So if you're playing something that is a little bit more demanding, that will have great graphics, like what you're seeing here, the newer phones will smooth this out. So that's just something that is kind of niche though. Like not everybody plays a bunch of games on their phone, but if they do play stuff like this, well, then that's some reason you might want to consider upgrading to the 17 here coming shortly. I'll be back when the final results are in. And here's our final Wildlife Extreme score. You can see we have an overall score of 1692. That's an average frame rate of 10.1 FPS. Now you can see it held pretty steady in the earlier parts of the test, but started to fall off at the end. Battery performance remained the same, but we have a low frame rate of 3, so when this throttles back, it can get very, very laggy there. And only scores better than 14% of devices. So versus all devices out there though, 29% better. So there's, what is that, 80? No, that's actually 71% of devices on the market are faster than this. So you could basically upgrade to anything that's newer and is going to be faster. But benchmarks don't tell the whole story. As we showed in the real world use for your day-to-day casual iPhone use, this phone is only going to slow you down if you're heavy multitasking, if you're heavy switching apps. Other than that, if you're just focused in and locked in on one at a time, the iPhone 12 still performs just fine. I'll be back when Geekbench 6 is done. And here's our final benchmark scores. And these are not terrible scores here. 2045 on the single core, and that's an average higher than the average iPhone 12. That's about 1,500 points less than the newer phones. But if you take a look at some 14s and stuff, they're not that far behind those. If we go over here to the average multi-core, I did better than the average as well on that one. And again, if you go back a bit to around like the 14, 13 days, it's not too far behind those either. So overall, not terrible results there for the benchmarks. Let's go ahead and take a quick photo sample here just to kind of see how fast the camera launches now in 3, 2, go. And you can see your photo is going to come out just fine and quickly. Let's do that again. No problem. Zooming is easy and smooth. There's not multiple lenses, just 2. So you basically have a very smooth range, but a very short zoom. So if you need more zoom and the camera matters to you, 5x is just very, very short. It looks long in this photo because I'm very close to that iPhone. And the overall results are still pretty acceptable. Very good photos and videos still in 2025 for the iPhone 12. Just not top of the line anymore, but still very respectable results. Nobody's going to even notice if you made a YouTube video on the iPhone 12 because we still got 4K 60 and 1080 60 on here. No major issues. Anyway, let's wrap it up and give you the final verdict. How does it run? I think it runs actually slightly nicer with the animations and prior versions. It feels a little snappier there. It feels like you just got a whole new phone when you download this. it's that much of a change. I would say if you're coming from a much older version or even 18, it's a big change. You also will get the nice customizations with the clear tinted icons, and it really just revamps the iPhone 12 while running still pretty good for casual daily use. However, I will state that if you are finding that you're using a lot more applications these days, or just kind of switching between a lot of apps, doing a lot of more productivity based things on your phone, this phone can feel a little bit slow when juggling multiple apps. Other than that, it runs pretty good here on iOS 26, and the only reason I would really recommend upgrading is for a much better battery life and a much better camera to the 17. But if not, if that's not really on your radar just yet, I think most iPhone 12 users could actually get through another year if they wanted to wait. So thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts on the iPhone 12, on iOS 26, and how it runs. I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.